On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
With the Venmo debit card, you can Venmo everything. Your favorite band's merch? You can Venmo this. Or their next show? You can Venmo that. Visit Venmo.me/debit to learn more. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Card may be used everywhere MasterCard is accepted. Venmo purchase restrictions apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. With school out, summer is the perfect time to teach our kids real-world money skills they'll use forever. Greenlight is a debit card and the #1 family finance and safety app used by millions of families, helping kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Parents can send their kids money and track their spending and saving, while kids build money confidence and skills in fun ways. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/Spotify. That's greenlight.com/Spotify.
The Jack Welch Management Institute at Strayer University helps you go from, I know the way, to I've arrived with our top 10 ranked online MBA. Gain skills you can learn today and apply tomorrow. Get ready to go from make it happen to made it happen and keep striving. Visit strayer.edu/Jack Welch MBA to learn more. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts.
Andres Lares, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you very much for having me, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Baltimore. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about negotiation and influencing for success. Success in life, success in relationships, success in work and business. And I'm just thrilled to have this conversation with you today. As we get started, I wanted to share Andres' bio with everybody. Andres Lares is the managing partner at Shapiro Negotiations Institute. As such, he is responsible for the day-to-day operations. He also continues to serve as a negotiation trainer and coach with an emphasis on sports and develop new initiatives such as interactive online training and virtual reality-based negotiation simulations. Super fascinating. I'm excited to hear more about that. But before we dive on into the conversation, anything else you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context?
Not much other than you might sense that. So I'm Venezuelan originally, hence the name, and then you might hear an accent because I mainly grew up in Canada. So that's just for folks that are wondering why I pronounce things a little bit different than they're used to.
Yeah, well, no, that's wonderful. Thank you. And tell us, why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about the Shapiro Negotiations Institute first, and then we can get into more of like what you do there.
Sure. So it's SNI is a 29-year-old company. It was founded by a gentleman named Ron Shapiro, who was known really for being a mega sports agent. So he actually was an attorney for a long time. So he ran a very prominent law firm. And this was kind of his baby in the sense that it's something he had wanted to do for a long time. So 29 years ago, he started it. And what made it unique is so it was a negotiation training company. What made it unique is, and I think unique in the sense, especially as a sports agent. So, for anyone listening in and for you, John, when I think of sports agents, and most people think of sports agents, they're not thinking warm and fuzzy feelings, I don't think.
Mm.
And so what made it unique is when he started this, he was still an active sports agent. And
Hmm.
this first set of clients were the owners of the teams he had been negotiating with. And so that was the kind of relationship he had with them. So he was still getting these massive deals. And that was kind of the beginning. And then it really kind of has developed into a corporate training company. We do negotiation influence training all over the world in 7 languages, still based in Baltimore. But, what does being based out of Baltimore mean anymore with remote work and
Right.
travel and everything else? And so, yeah, no, and then there's a bit of a sports, theme still in the sense that we advise sports teams. So that's kind of still remain. But now we work with a lot of the kind of the Fortune 5,000 type. So that's kind of who we are and what we do.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream house or ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
Close your eyes, exhale, feel your body relax, and let go of whatever you're carrying today.
Well, I'm letting go of the worry that I wouldn't get my new contacts in time for this class. I got them delivered free from 1-800-CONTACTS. Oh my gosh, they're so fast.
And breathe.
Oh, sorry. I almost couldn't breathe when I saw the discount they gave me on my first order. Oh, sorry. Namaste.
Visit 1-800-CONTACTS.com today to save on your first order.
1-800-CONTACTS. She's made up her mind to live pretty smart. Learn to budget responsibly right from the start. She spends a little less and puts more into savings. Keeps her blood pressure low and credit score raises. She's cutting debt right out of her life. She tracks her cash flow on a spreadsheet at night.
Boring money moves make kinda lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
Yeah. So still the sports theme, but like you said, you've branched out into more corporate work. So tell us a little bit more about really the role of negotiation and influencing. Obviously, in the world of a sports agent, that's everything. Everyone's seen Jerry Maguire, Show Me the Money. Like, it brings chills to people. It's a fun movie. All of that, right? So I think everyone understands why negotiation is super important in that world. Why would this organization start to branch into more corporate types of trainings, and what are some of the types of things that you do to more of just a general corporate audience?
For sure, and I think it goes back to actually the way you started, talking about how this episode might be valuable for folks negotiating it, whether it's personal lives, professional lives. We're negotiating all the time. So the sports team continues, but it's only about 20-25% of our work, right? So definitely corporate work is by far the lion's share at this point, and that's where a lot of the opportunities and growth are. And so what we typically will do is, if you think of the most common positions that are negotiating all the time, it's, sales forces, for example, right? So salespeople are negotiating all the time.
Yeah.
But negotiating is interesting. And this goes into why it's also used in our personal lives, professional lives, because negotiating, when people think of negotiating, think of kind of like, you're at a flea market, you're negotiating, I'll pay 20, now they say 10, you go back and forth.
Right.
Or you're buying a used car, right? But what happens is negotiating is for access, right? So we're in the pharmaceutical space training salespeople. They're negotiating for access to the decision makers. You might be negotiating for information, right? You're negotiating for the terms and conditions in a legal document. You're negotiating. So it's not just price. And actually rarely does it come down to only price, right? There's so many other variables. And so those are really you're negotiating as a salesperson, as a procurement person. We train engineers, right? Because they might be managing accounts and maybe it's essentially soft skills training for them. Project managers, program managers. I mean, we've even trained nurses and doctors. And
Mm.
almost that starts to go closer into communication because if you think about it, kind of how important the bedside manner and the relationship they have with patients is just as important as what really their kind of skill set, if you will, right? If I can convince John to take his medication, or if I can convince John to do X, Y, or Z, that's almost as impactful as the other things you're going to do. So that's negotiation, and then influencing is even more broad in the sense that we are essentially trying to compel others to act all the time. I've got two young kids, and so I know I'm doing that often, maybe not as effectively as I'd like. So I've got to maybe sharpen my skills too. But this is certainly used in every part of your life.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's just a matter of the words we use and the meanings that we assign to the words, right? So all of us go about our day trying to get things done. And so for some people, perhaps negotiation isn't the word that they would use. But I think most people would say, yeah, I'm trying to influence others. I'm trying to accomplish things with and through others. And most people also probably wouldn't like the word manipulation. I don't want to be manipulated. I don't want to manipulate others, but I do want to be influenced, and I do want to influence. And negotiation is part of that. And so while I wouldn't advocate for manipulation or coercion, so to speak. I think influence is naturally part of day-to-day life. We're social animals. We interact with each other in very social ways, and it's inevitable, right? And so it's just a matter of us understanding how we interact with each other and trying to do it in a healthy, positive way, not to be exploitative, not to take advantage of people and take advantage of weakness, but to just be able to move things forward in a positive way. So like I think about my spouse, or my children. Do I want to have a home that's happy and healthy and where my kids like don't throw tantrums and where my wife and I get along? Yes, to all of those things. Does that mean that I rule with an iron fist and that I'm constantly playing mind games with everybody to try to get what I want? Absolutely not, because that's not healthy. And so, like, I think sometimes we assign all of these meanings to the words because of past experiences, perhaps because of movies or media that we've consumed, and I think if we just take a step back and just try to realize, like, what does it actually mean to influence others in a positive, healthy way? That's something I think we all want to engage in on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis. And whether it's at home with my wife or with my children, whether it's at work with my coworkers and colleagues, I want to be able to have a successful project. I want to be able to deliver for the client. All of that requires influence, and all of that requires sometimes micro negotiations along the way, sometimes big negotiations along the way.
I love that, and I think it is certainly that way. So I think of one example. We've got a couple of clients in the professional services space, and this encapsulates that exactly. Where the reason they do negotiation or sometimes influence training, and they don't, they want a lot of these skills, but they will never touch sales training, for example, is their professional services. So they might be, a partner in a professional service, like an accounting firm or consulting firm, is that selling to them feels dirty, right?
Mm.
That's all right. They're kind of, and not in a bad way. They're not necessarily judging sales, but like that's not part of my job, is the way they see it. And so
Right.
what's happening is that, but they really gravitate towards negotiation influence training because that feels like something that professionals do. And even though many of the same skills apply, right? If you're selling, you need to be prepared. You have to understand the value you bring to the table. And they do, so it is interesting that they gravitate towards negotiation. They hire us to do that. When if we were to call the same training, which has a lot of overlap in sales training, for example, they would shy away from it, right? And it's also the same way that procurement folks, we train a lot of them too. They want to know that we've done negotiation training for procurement people. And even in just small framing of the experience of procurement makes it come to life, even though clearly procurement folks are on the buy side and negotiate all the time. So I love
Mhm.
the semantics. While to some extent they're not important, and the flip side is they can be very important, right? What we call a training program, even we were very thoughtful about whether we call the book Persuade or Influence, even between those. And we addressed manipulation very early on
Yeah.
because, we want to compel others to act, but in a positive way, not in an abusive way. We want to be an intent ended up being one of the biggest things, right? When we studied it, it's about intent. And so there's just a lot there to talk about, but I love that. And I think those words do matter.
Yeah, yeah. Semantics, I don't want to like get stuck in playing semantic games. But words do matter because people get hung up on them and people have resistance to, framings and words and how we frame things absolutely matters and the stories we tell do matter. And so all of that, we acknowledge it up front. So like you said, I like that in the book that you acknowledge that very much, very clearly, in a straightforward manner up front. So you can just set it out in the open and then set it aside and then move into what you're actually addressing. I think that's the healthy way to go about doing it. So regardless of the actual terminology that we end up using, like you said, whether it's sales, influence, persuasion, negotiation, there's a lot of overlapping skill sets and competencies there. Like think about a Venn diagram. There's all of these overlaps. What would you say are some of the most important transferable, overlappable types of skills and competencies that really anyone, I mean, in any aspect of life you would probably need, but certainly in careers and in work that anyone would need?
So, I mean, it's a great question. We think about it all the time. So, those are all really communication skills. So, if you think of sales training, negotiating training, influence training, they're all communication skills. And I think that the thread that has come about, and I think it's becoming even more and more prominent over time, just the way that the world's going with, introduction of AI and kind of, the things that maybe are more difficult for machines to replicate as people. I would say it's so emotional intelligence is certainly one of them, right? We think about the training programs that we do, and if sometimes we call it very much emotional intelligence, sometimes it's baked in, but we think of the skills of being able to, I mean, for example, empathy, self-awareness, right? So we all have weaknesses, but some, are know their weaknesses and are able to build a team around them, for example, to help support that or help work on developing that. So that starts there. That self-awareness piece is super important. Empathy is really, really critical. So in every train, if we teach negotiation or influencing, if you think about it, and this is a little bit biased for us, but we teach a relationship-based approach, right? So our book around negotiations is called The Power of Nice. Now, that doesn't mean you're a pushover. The nice is important, but the nice is really a vehicle, right? So relationships are a currency when you're influencing, when you're negotiating, when you're selling. And so empathy makes it real, right? Then it's genuine. Like if I'm negotiating with John, I'm trying to find a solution that maximizes my objectives because I'm doing my job. I get paid to do my job. But both because I want to do it the right way and because to reach a better solution, I'm thinking about what John cares about. I am discovering that, and I'm trying to put as much of that as possible in the deal. And so, again, this is not for everyone. 80, 90% of people I think now think this way. It's certainly evolved to less kind of burn that bridge when we get their mentality. I would say, though, candidly, we do get, every now and then a rare organization that says, power of nice, that's not us. We want to, really be hard and stick it to them. And that's fine. Better to know that up front, like you said earlier, we tell them who we are, and if those don't align. But I would say empathy is really, really critical. And then the last thing is having a process or a structure. So we think of, you're going to be in a very difficult situation. You have to let someone go or deliver some bad news or, a troubling conversation with a colleague or a superior or someone you manage. And so any of these things that are maybe challenging conversations, having a process is very, very helpful. So you can structure it in your mind. So having a preparation process, that can help kind of how you approach the conversation. And so and the reason that helps is not only does it make you better, more effective, but then one other theme that I think is really important is confidence. There's a line we talk about, nothing convinces like conviction, right? So if you're not even sure how to deliver this challenging news to your colleague, how in the world are you going to deliver it in a way that's going to be really compelling to them, right? Or, really be kind of understood the way you'd like it to be understood. So those are a few that come to mind. And there's lots of other skills, great question asking is super critical in all of these as well. But those are the ones that come to mind first.
Yeah, yeah, and all of those are different aspects, like you said, of communication, of the question asking that you just shared right at the tail end of that. I think is so important. You need to understand the empathy is part of that, right? So if you have good emotional intelligence, if you have empathy, then you're sitting across from the person, or you're on a Zoom call or a telephone call or whatever, and you can actually have a sense for where this person's at and what they need. And it's not like we don't have like magical discernment. I can't read your mind, but I have a sense for like the types of questions that I can ask so that I can uncover those things. And that's a key difference. You know, some people, I really do think some people think they have a magic sense of discernment, that they think that they can just divine magically what other people want or need or whatever. And that's silly. I mean, it really is silly. And really what that is just bias. It's
And
sometimes unconscious.
assumptions.
It's
And lots of
assumptions.
assumptions.
It's
Yeah.
assumptions, it's bias, and sometimes you're right, but a lot of times you're wrong, and you're probably going to end up shooting yourself in the foot more often than not. And so what it really comes down to is just having like the intellectual humility to ask questions and to really be attuned to what people are saying and their body language and like how they're being with you as they're responding to the questions that you're asking, and that you're asking the right types of questions. And all of that comes back to communication, right? And so when I think about the best communicators, the best negotiators, the best influencers and persuaders, often it's quiet people. Like it's people who aren't like assuming people. It's not people that are in your face. It's people that have like a confidence about them, kind of a quiet calm, who just are self-assured and reassured and are quiet and listening. And they listen hard. They listen more than they speak, you know, kind of that old trope. There's truth to that, you know? And so I know that's a huge oversimplification, and just like sitting there and being quiet doesn't mean you're a good communicator, and it doesn't mean you're a good persuader, but you know, having a combination of these different elements is going to be really important. And I think in the modern world of like hustle and bustle and like noise and input overload and everything, like sometimes that having that ability to be still and quiet is a bit of a superpower. So that's maybe something we can flex a little bit more.
And uncommon, I think uncommon.
Yeah, it's
so
uncommon.
One of the two things that come to mind based on what you said, one of the most powerful statements I heard a long time ago was from one of our facilitators. That's not like formally in our program, but there's a difference between listening and waiting to speak.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that while that is such a simple concept, I mean, is like life changing to me. This is like very early on in my career. And that's always stuck with me. And so I think about, and now I take notes. I've got a remarkable, and I've got it here. And, I take notes because then I feel like I take a couple of notes as I'm listening. And so then I don't have to worry about or what I'm going to say. I don't have to think about it all. I can truly listen. And I think what I've layered on top of that is genuine curiosity. Everything you talked about
Yeah.
is led by genuine curiosity. And that I would say that's, if you're asking questions because you're curious, and you said the word humility, like if you're humble, if you're actually looking to learn, which is very different because even, step one is you got to be willing not to be talking the whole time. Step two, really focus on listening. And then step three is focusing on what the other person's saying and be humble enough that you actually may learn something rather than, it's only my way. I just got to get him to think more like me and so and that's natural, right? You're just kind of waiting. Oh, yeah, perfect. Because now there's a gap, and I can communicate what I've been waiting to communicate. And so I think humility, curiosity, and it's funny. Think of how many courses now teach like authenticity and being genuine. And it's amazing we've gotten to a point we have to remind people that you should actually, be yourself and be genuine. So I think, unfortunately, all the competing priorities that we have in scaling and automation and technology, that's sometimes forgotten. But that's what makes the personal touch, I think, so impactful still. That you and I can have this conversation. Think how different this conversation would be if we weren't on video, even, for example, even though folks won't listen, they will listen and maybe not see us, but it just changes the quality and the richness of the conversation. So these details matter.
It's interesting. Yeah. So my ability to convince you, that's something you mentioned just a minute ago. And it's, I think when you have the humility and the curiosity, I still may have a goal that I want to convince you. Like, I think when we go into like a debate or an argument, like ultimately, I think I'm right. Ultimately, I want to convince you. I think that's natural. We're human animals. We want to, for our point of view to win out the day. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but having enough humility to recognize that perhaps we don't know everything, and enough curiosity to at least, at a minimum, be curious and want to understand your side, to understand your perspective, and to be willing, like to just have a crack in the door, be willing to acknowledge that maybe I'm wrong, or at least maybe I'm not all right. Like that is huge. And so often when we talk about negotiation or persuasion or influence, that is not even present. Like it's 100% how am I going to win? How am I going to convince this person? And that's all that's going through the person's head the entire time they're interacting with the other person. And
Yeah,
so
how will you reach a good solution if that happens, right? If all you're thinking about is yourself, how in the world will you reach a solution that works for the other party? And but it's obvious when you say it that way, it feels obvious. But in the moment, now of course you're human, like you said. So when I'm in the moment, I feel that too. When you're in the moment, you feel that too. And that's part of the reason you have a coach and you do training to be able to step
yeah,
outside yourself because it's more obvious in other people, like anything else, right? And you realize, oh, okay, yeah, now it becomes obvious. But now, how do I remind myself under pressure that that's the way? And someone said to me one time, that, if you can't think of a time in an argument or discussion that you were wrong and that you admitted you were wrong, then that actually says, more about kind of the way you think about it than who you're talking to, right? Because that's impossible. And I thought it's interesting.
yeah.
And so that you got to remind yourself, if you're never wrong, are you even leaving? Is that window even cracked open a hair? And it's not. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's not fool ourselves. Like being a great negotiator doesn't mean all quote unquote always winning. Being a great influencer and persuader doesn't mean always convincing everyone to your point of view. It means getting to a point of mutual, win-win. We could throw out all the kind of the warm, fluffy, fuzzy, terms, synergies, whatever buzz terms you want to use. I don't really care. I just the point is it's not sometimes it is a zero sum game, but most of the time it's not. Like most of the time we really are working together to get to creative solutions and influencing each other in a positive way to get to better outcomes. And if I'm stuck in a fixed pie, zero sum kind of mentality, all that is limiting. That's just limiting me. It's limiting you. It's limiting the potential outcomes. And it's sure I might win in the moment. I might win this interaction, but what does that mean for future interactions? What does that mean for our relationship? What does that mean, if I'm a salesperson and you're a customer and I win this interaction and I sell you a lemon, so what? Like, what does that mean for future sales? Like, what does that mean for customer experience and sale and customer loyalty, right? Like, ultimately, it's so much bigger than that, and so we have to get past that. And I think any of us who take this out of kind of the business world, where sometimes we do think in a bit too much of a short-term perspective, and we take this out of the business world and we apply it into like normal, like real life relationships, like home relationships, wife, spouse, partner, kids, friends. When we put it in that kind of a perspective, we're like, of course we wouldn't do that. Of course, that's not how we would interact in those relationships. And if that's the case, then why in the world would we interact in those relationships in a business context, in a workplace context? We wouldn't. That's not healthy. So let's not do that. Let's do better in how we influence and persuade and negotiate, even in the workplace.
I mean, I love that. And I think, but like I said, there's that 10% of folks who've been in the room with that do not think of it that way. I mean, I was just in a meeting very recently and they said, like, we just got to really stick it to them. That's our job. And so it's like, it goes to what you said, right? If you're, it's like expectations are a part of it. And what's funny is if you think of negotiation, whether it's personal, professional, whatever it is, that's essentially the beginning of the relationship or the continuance, right? In every way, right? If you're an athlete and you sign a contract with a team, if you buy something, you're now becoming a client. If you're on the selling side, they're becoming your client. If you're a contract negotiator, if you're a lawyer, if anything, on the procurement side, you're now procuring a new vendor you're going to work with. So the negotiation is actually the beginning of the relationship or the continuance, right? Thereafter, there'll be more. And so if you think of it that way, the concept that you would just kind of like smash them, it's like that's the beginning. If that's how you begin the relationship, how could you possibly expect the relationship to be successful? And so, again, that clearly shows my bias. Now, I would say, as we've mentioned to clients that feel that way, there are a few situations on the very minor, rare occasion where the other side is very difficult, very challenging, Machiavellian, will do whatever it takes, and you adjust your strategy. You realize that in those cases, they don't value the relationship. And so you're aware of that, you adjust your strategy, and you should, right? Everything, that kind of the old phrase of, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you cannot use the one, and you got to be able to flex and use a different strategy. But that is very rare. I mean,
Yeah.
as humans, almost everyone values relationships, because the reality is that's currency in the bank, right? That means
Yeah.
that person, if you help that person, they're more likely to help you in the time of need. And so that is a currency. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily you drop your price by 20% or you give them everything they ask for, but that is a currency that has real value. And so it is interesting that, not everyone thinks that way. And I guess that's, to each their own, but we're certainly screaming from the mountaintops the same kind of way to approach it as you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, wonderful. Andres, this has just been a really fun conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Perfect. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate you having me, and it was a pleasure. It flew by, so hopefully it did for listeners as well. So, I mean, you're finding us, the Shapiro Negotiation Institute. Look us up online, and we will post a lot of, whether it's blogs or content all the time on LinkedIn. And then we recently published a book a couple of years ago called Persuade. That was my partner Jeff Cochran and I, and I'd say find us there, and hopefully this conversation and some of those resources can be helpful to all your listeners.
Excellent. Andres, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Andres and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.